Hello, my name is Angela Skibberus and I am the kinesiologist and a lot more than that. It's what I call myself, but I mostly work in the realm of Resolve Beyond Neurology and neuro training as well, bits and pieces of neuro training, a big part of the last almost 20 years of my work. And it's a real incredible privilege to yet again have one of my favorite people on chatting with me and diving into some rabbit holes. I think, we should have our own show called The Rabbit Hole, because we tend to have a bit of fun diving down them. So, obviously we're going to chat about a few topics related to all things most people would understand the work that we've done in the past and we do as kinesiology, but obviously as it's evolved over time, both myself and Aaron, who was a client at one stage many moons ago, although had extraordinary results with kinesiology and neuro training and moving into Resolve as well, which does have specific differences around, and similarities. Yes, in Neuro Training and Resolve, we use muscle testing, but many of the ways that we work around conflict and resolving it can be a little bit different than the usual kinesiology way of doing things. Although that said, I'm proud to be a kinesiologist, and it's something that I'm still enjoying almost 20 years in. So thank you, Aaron, for being on today to chat with us. We were to and froing about what we might dive into, although not that will necessarily make any difference as to where this rabbit hole ends up. But we thought we've got to start somewhere. And so we were chatting about, what's been coming up of late in clinic. What have people been, what's often we'll end up with patterns around certain types of things coming in for people. What are we noticing out there in the community? And also I wondered if we could drop down a little bit of a rabbit hole as to trying to decipher. It's something that Aaron and I have enjoyed talking about before. What is it about what we do that makes it powerful? Is it explainable? Sometimes it feels like it's inexplicable. And trying to, I guess, garner more information, garner more almost scientific pulling apart of what it is that we do. When sometimes it feels it's extremely difficult to explain to people what we do. But I feel we're coming to a time where science and the woo are becoming, starting to phase in and starting to understand one another a little bit more. So not to say that what we do is woo, but for some, it can feel that way. So
it's a bit wooish.
It can feel that way. It really can feel that way, even though if I'm sure you could agree after the many years you've now been working that actually the results are predictable. And as much as it's not a cookie cutter, this is the difficult thing about the work that we do. No two sessions are alike. You can't necessarily have someone come in with could be some symptom, and then another person comes in with the same symptom. They're not going to have the same session. So it's not like you can predictably use the same technique every single time and get the same results, because it may not be what the person needs.
Exactly, yep.
So that's where it becomes a bit more difficult. So I guess we tend to want to look at, well, what is the thread that comes through it that we're working with. I know Aaron put up on the table that what's interesting for him lately is noticing there are a lot of clients coming in feeling like life's out of control, a lot of lack of motivation. And if I'm honest, I'm noticing that with probably 90% of my clients coming in feeling very disconnected and zero motivation, going through the motions. And also the whole thing around really starting to have people understand how it's the unexpected experiences in life that can have much more detrimental effects on our nervous system and trauma responses. So what have you been noticing in clinic in the last few months, Aaron, around all of that?
Yeah, well, I think it's like we said, it's in a big nutshell. It is just people feeling out of control and people feeling almost directionless or stuck in life, and not realizing that at all times, and there's obviously a lot of stuff behind this, but not realizing or remember or making the connection that we're always actually in control. It's almost like the perception of being out of control, or the feeling of being stuck or out of control, it's almost like their perception of their day-to-day life, or their perception of their reality is like, well, I only have one option. And it's almost like they get fixated on that one option, and that's continuing to do life the way I'm doing it. And that one option may be, I'm not sure, like it might be, I'm just trying to think, my one option may be just to stay stuck in same, to continue to sort of go about my day, to continue to go about the things I'm doing the same way I've done them every day. And therefore, I know it might sound contradictory, and we can break it down, but therefore, because I'm so stuck, because I'm so in the mundane, it's like I'm not in control of everything else. It's almost like that perception that I only have one option directly ties in with I'm out of control, and and therefore I'm powerless in life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Therefore, yeah. Go ahead. Keep going.
But then I was going to say, but one thing I'm trying to reiterate to my clients, as there's many patterns that can be behind this, unresolved experiences, unresolved trauma, but just trying to reiterate and help my clients understand that at all time you do hold the power within you, and it's only the perception that you have, that you only have one option, or you are optionless, that creates the feeling of a lack of control. But when you remember that you can take any option, make any decision you like, then therefore you are not powerless but powerful, and not helpless but able to help yourself to then move forward, out of this feeling and out of this situation of being stuck. Does that make? I hope I'm making sense there, and I didn't just word salad everybody. Yeah. So
it's good. No, exactly that, and it's the whole concept. I'm thinking that, it's like this double-edged sword of, I want things to change, but while things are exactly the same, I feel safe, and I know what I know. And when we start to look at, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and that is scary for some people, the unknown. So I think I'd rather keep dealing with, whether it be the relationship breakdown, or a job that's very stressful and not great for our nerves, whatever it is, a situation. It could be our health. We're really wanting to exercise more or become fitter, or whatever, and yet I still get up late and don't make time for that, or whatever it is. So, but it's that whole realm of the I know what I don't know. And then part of where we start to step in is helping people to access what they don't know about.
That's exactly right.
About why they're doing that. And I love how people like Dr. Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton are helping us to explain and see what we do, with a bit more clarity around the whole concept that, really it's helping people to access what they don't know, which is the factor which will help them to truly transform their lives. Because while we're in habit, and subconscious habit usually comes from those defense patterns, or patterns that have been passed down, or patterns that we've learnt that have been kept us safe in the past. And we keep going back to the past when the past has kept me safe. So therefore, I'll keep doing that. And the future can't not show up any other way.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And I think it's that in the future, I love that you mentioned Joe Dispenza and how he talks about that. It's like familiar past, predictable future, right? So based on what's happened in the past and what I do every day, then that gives me a predictable future through which then I know I can be safe. And I think it is that safety, like we're sitting in that safety, we're sitting in that predictability or that same, and life's happening all around us. And I think that's where that out of control feeling comes in, because it's like you said, you know, I might want to get up early, or I might want to, you know, lose weight or go for a run, or I want to get up and meditate, or I want to do yoga, or whatever it is. So there's all these things that I want to do that I don't feel like I've got a grasp on or feel like I've got control of. So it's just because I'm so stuck in the predictability of what I've always been doing. And I think that's, like you said, it's like trying to we don't know what we don't know, right? And for a lot of people, it's the not knowing is the scary part. You get what I'm saying? So it's like moving into and breaking down those habits, or breaking down, or at least feeling like you can have safety in situations in life where it's unpredictable and in the unknown. Because to say what Joe Dispenza says, it's like that's where the magic happens, right? The magic happens in the unknown. So yeah.
Exactly. And I totally agree. And I think it makes me think about a client that I had recently who's had an issue in her life, and we've done a couple of sessions on it, and major issues happening and needing, you know, some new strategies being needed to be implemented in her life, like in the physical realm. You know, what strategies can we look like, you know, because often in session we'll look at, okay, so this is how life is showing up. How can we support you and your nervous system to start to open up to new strategies of, you know, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So how can we start, if we change something in the physical realm, other things can't not change. And so we went through, I reckon, 20 different options of maybe we could try this, maybe we could try that, maybe we could try this, maybe we could try that. No, and no, can't do that for all the reasons why. No, can't do that for all the reasons why. No, can't do that for all the reasons why. And I said, well, do you really want this to change? Like, I'm actually really, let's like be honest, like, do you really want this to change? I'm not saying you should do what I say, but that is a really interesting question, is that, do you want it to change? And she said, I do want it to change. I was like, okay, so can we play with some of the possibilities of a couple of these outcomes? Can we move towards having you feel comfortable around a couple of these particular changes that we could start to make? And she said, I actually burst into tears. I actually can't perceive, I can't feel in my body. So when I asked her, like, let's sit and imagine what it would be like if this outcome happened, if this major change, if this changed in your life. She couldn't access any thought, any imaginative construct at all, even like a dream, even like, you know, if we could sit and think about what it would be like to win $1 million, most of us could imagine what that's like. She couldn't. Every time we go through, the resistance was so huge. She burst into tears. I can't even literally imagine how that's possible. I have no access to it whatsoever. Like, all of those options sound great, and they won't make a difference. And so the reality for that woman, it's like, you know, okay, we need to look at the resistance. And that's where I mentioned to Aaron just before we jumped on, some of you may have heard of the silver method, and something pricked my ears after seeing this particular lady. And we did a little bit of work on just starting to have her gain access to possibility. She couldn't gain, in most areas of her life, there was no access to possibility at all, not like a dream, not like a vision, not like nothing. And Jose Silva, some of you can look up Jose Silva. He was a radio repairman, and his realm was electronics. And that kind of made me think, oh, wow, it sort of reminds me of the way Bruce Lipton, who talks about epigenetics and looking at our cells like little radio receivers. And, you know, it's like we are this energetic entity. And Jose Silva noticed that the brain operates in a similar way to an electronic device, in that operates with an electrical current. And based on what I think is called you can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but I think it's OHMS Ohm's law, is that if we reduce resistance in an electrical wire, it allows more electricity to flow through it. So I started to think about, well, maybe part of what we're doing for people is if there's resistance to changing a pattern they keep doing over and over again, and we do the work to remove the resistance so that the electricals, the information, it could be nutrition, it could be blood, it could be lymph, it could be something that we're affecting to flow differently. Does that allow them more access to parts of their brain that's previously been in lockdown, for example, which could be a segue. It could have been in lockdown due to possibly an unexpected trauma. So do you think it's possible, Aaron, that okay, so for this woman in particular, she came back the next week after we did that, a little bit of getting access to reducing the resistance to change, because actually what's underneath all that resistance to change is I do not know what's going to happen if I change all that. It could backfire, and I'm terrified of what I actually don't know what that will look like. So we can see the protective mechanisms. We can see the reason why she would be resisting change on every level, and her brain just going, no, can't even look at that possibility. It's too frightening. So then having to go back to, well, why? What was the unexpected experience or occurrence that caused her brain to decide that anything new outside of what she's doing right now is far too unsafe to access? Almost like parts of the computer is it's locked down, you can't get to it. So possibly what we're doing is reducing the resistance, giving them more access to possibility. What do you think about that?
Well, there's heaps to unpack there. That's what I think about that. So let's start on the resistance part of it. So
yeah.
Or as far as not being able to access a particular, I don't know what my kinesiology brain is going, not being able to access brain functions. That's exactly where it's
resources.
Resources, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that. And obviously, one of our brain functions or one of our resources that we have, and not to get too specific, is imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we are, it is very, very possible that we have had an unresolved experience. And just to sort of explain to people a little bit more, whenever we talk about an unresolved experience, we're talking about something that may be commonly known as like a trauma, shock, something that's a threat, a dread, a fear, something like that. Just so whenever you hear us say that, that's what we're talking about. But so whenever some kind of experience, they've had an unresolved experience, and then that, like you're saying, it creates resistance or a inability to access that particular resource. So what I know when we start talking about resistance, my brain goes straight to, if there's resistance, then there's an absence of trust.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got an absence of trust there. And that absence of trust, that trust can be a very broad word, and you can have a lack of trust or an inability to trust, an incapacity to trust either yourself or the outside world or your inner world or people. So then it's like, to just really hypothetically put together a possible scenario here for your client. It's sort of like, well, based on this unresolved experience I've had, I have an absence of trust in my dreams, my hopes, my goals for the future. Like, I don't trust that any of those are going to come to fruition, say. So therefore, based on this experience, now that I don't trust that anything that I envision for my life is going to come to fruition, now there's resistance because there's an absence of trust. So then it's like, well, it might sound quite I don't know, quite layman's, but it's like, what's even the point of utilizing my imagination when, you know, like when it, based on this experience I've had, nothing I ever can imagine or dream for myself is going to come true or come to fruition anyway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, so that's where I'm at. I mean, like, I'm happy to sort of throw it over you to add more insight to that, but that's what popped into my head as you were going through that, you know, just an inability to access particular brain functions or resources we have, and how, you know, when there's resistance, there's an absence of trust. And then, like you said, actually going back to the electrical current side of things, when we, like, yeah, when we resolve, when we do the sessions with our clients, and we resolve that unresolved experience, and therefore, using the example I gave, therefore having trust again in the fact that I can, like, have imagined my future and have hopes and dreams and that they could possibly come to fruition, or have goals or whatever they may be. So therefore that resistance in that electrical wire, as you put it, is no longer there, because the experience which caused the resistance and the absence of trust in the first place no longer exists, or now we have an ability to perceive it differently or perceive life differently. So that's where so I think that that's what we're doing there. It's that the resistance in the electrical wire is the unresolved experience.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I think if I try to think back to some of them. I'm trying to think if it's I think it might be Joe Dispenza, because he's done a lot of really legitimate scientific studies on how people's brains light up in real time. Even I don't know about now, but I know in the past, even Bruce Lipton and others have done real time experiences where they've connected someone's brain up to a computer of sorts and had them go into a meditation or think about certain things, even do some of the techniques we do, such as cross crawl or integrations, crossing the midline, which affects the brain in a certain way. To, interestingly, when you cross the midline, which is something that we do a lot in session, where whether it be cross crawling, crossing, you know, one side of the body to the opposite side of the body, or even just, you know, crossing your legs, crossing your hands, crossing that, you know, one hemisphere over to the other, it actually again reduces the resistance in the electrical system. So it's more likely that when, say, we're working on creating a new synapse or a new, because at the end of the day, if you've never experienced in your life, which this particular client had never experienced what it was like for someone to respect boundaries,
right,
had no concept of it, didn't even know how, like, what does that even look like? I don't know. I actually don't know. So for her, it's not like a pattern. I don't even know how to imagine how that would look like, because it's not there for me at all. So we'd create new experiences or new synapses or new electrical wiring in the brain to be able to experience, understand, go, oh yeah, like when we're babies, we learn to walk and talk and create all those different abilities over time. So, you know, in real time, they've done scientific studies where, you know, we cross the midline and we see it reduces the resistance in the nervous system, so that it's more likely that you will create this new particular, say it could be, I am experiencing respected boundaries, or I am respected boundaries, whatever it is, right? Or I am boundaries at all. And when we cross the midline, that actually reduces the resistance in the system. So it's more likely. I thought, well, that's why maybe we do, you know, why cross crawling works really well when we bring it in as a tool to help people shift something through, because again, it reduces the resistance in the system. And so is resistance, my question is resistance in the system an ultimate defense pattern?
Wow. Oh, I feel right now that'd take me hours to ponder that one.
Is it like,
what? Goodness me. Is resistance, how did you word that again? Is resistance
in the system, so in the nervous system, resistance in any way. So is it, well, I can't say the ultimate,
Yeah. No, I liked it. Yeah.
But I'm thinking, well, is it part of that? Well, it has to be part of the defense mechanism, resistance, because it's like that which you, but this is going to flip it now. So there's also the whole concept that which you resist
persists. All right. Wow. Resistance, is that the ultimate part? See, I'm even pondering now. You got like, even though I'm not saying anything, my brain's going a million miles an hour right now.
Yeah, because I'm thinking.
All right. Well, obviously, I've been asked that question before, so let's spitball and let's go down rabbit holes here, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, well, even in regards to the brain, as you were talking, I was thinking maybe, I know in our last chat we mentioned Whiteboard Kinesiology, WBK, and no, we're not talking about wrestling, even though we think that's pretty cool. But Whiteboard Kinesiology, maybe what we need to do in another chat when we do one is have the whiteboard in the background, and we can draw like, oh, this is what a neural pathway does, and this just to give like a visual example of like how you're saying creating new synapses and how that works and new patterns. Because I do that in session for people. I do that on my whiteboard here, and just to give them a visual understanding of basically, here's what we're doing, so you can respond differently to life and respond differently to situations. So is resistance then, back to resistance, is that an inability to integrate? And I'm just going to keep going there, right? So an inability to integrate something. So like, is resistance an inability for your left and right brain to communicate appropriately? So, because I know we've got the corpus callosum in between our left and right hemispheres. I know, like, I think I know, but I know when we're in survival, one of the first things that our nervous system or our body does when we're in survival is to shut down that corpus callosum. So that corpus callosum, I've used a very similar example to say that's like the switchboard for your brain. If people, hopefully, for the younger people out there, back in the day, like people used to ring up the operator to be put through to somewhere on the phone, and they'd literally move plugs around to put you through to talk to the doctor or to your friend or to the vet or whatever it was, right? So is that where that resistance comes in? So it's like we're in survival, and because we're in survival, that corpus callosum gets shut down. So therefore we can't integrate this communication between left and right brain. So I don't know if that's the answer, but like I said, just throwing it out there for discussion, that maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's part of an inability to integrate.
I like that. I like that a lot. And it actually, as you were speaking about the brain, I wish I could remember where I literally was in clinic the other day, and this came up in some research when we were looking into, sort of that whole concept of the corpus callosum and the way it shuts down, and we go into fight flight. We go into like the black box recorder, I call it, in the brainstem. And a lot of people who obviously, if they are in fight flight, which I think a lot of people are kind of walking around a lot of the time in their brainstem, you can generally tell because they're in a lot of defense and upset or, and so part of, I guess, what we're doing is helping the body to come out of that stress response, or trauma response, whatever, back up into the corpus callosum, back up into the cerebellum, to be able to think clearly, access their resources and abilities and all that sort of things. And of course, what lives back in the brainstem is, if we think about it like a black box recorder in a plane, it's all the information that's come down through our experiences. It's the information that's come through down from ancestry, from our parents, from their parents, and it's just all the survival strategies, in one little package. And which is in some ways quite ingenious that the system has got this, oh my God, emergency, go back to the, and it's quick. It's far quicker. That subconscious, unconscious brainstem response is, I'm going to spit out a number that's wrong, but say it's like 1,000 times faster than your ability to use your frontal brain. It's lightning speed, and we know how quick that is because before you've even thought about the car hitting you, you've leapt out of the way. Like, and that's the beauty of the design. We want it there so that we can respond like instantaneously.
Yeah.
But that when we're in the brainstem in certain areas of our life or all areas of our life, that's why before someone can even think something through to decide how they might respond to something, if it's triggering them into an old trauma response, which is emergency, you know, the plane's going down, back into the black box recorder, bang, they've gone into defense, resistance. And it could be around an area of life that they really want. They really want to buy a house or something, and bang, because of an experience when they're a kid and their parents lost their house or something, they've said no before they could, whatever it is. Like it's so fast and we've acted so quickly that it's difficult to disrupt.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of our work, is helping people come out of that black box recorder around something to start accessing that whole brain, the whole brain experience. But what it also made me think about is this little piece of research, which I feel terrible because I can't back it up with where I found it. And I can't remember the time frame, but it's apparently babies are in their brainstem for a certain period of the first part of life.
Right.
So, and it just made me go, oh, wow, that's why they just generally immediately go to meltdown or upset or this or that. And they're tending to just go straight to recorded patterns from parents. Like that's all they can go to. It's not like they've developed them themselves at that point in time. And then the question is, well, if then young people, in particularly in our youth, from 1 to 7, they say 7 maketh the man. So from 1 to 7, we are in literally record. We've talked about this before. Our nervous system, our brain, is in record from conception to 7, all the time, 24/7. Like it's, children are just absorbing information, not learning. And then after 7, learning becomes, you know, by rote or by whatever. But it's just like you're just walking around on record the whole time. So if you never as a child came out of brainstem into whole brain, you can see how some people just carry their childhood traumas into the rest of their lives and find that, you know, certain things just keep showing up and the trauma keeps being replayed. The friends that they then have, the people that they go on to marry, just keep reflecting back into those early days or traumas that possibly even their parents had. So, yeah, that was a really long-winded way of just sort of saying I think you're exactly right around, you know, helping the clients come out of that fight-flight response that's back in the brainstem is a big part of what we do.
Yeah.
And cross-calling, crossing the midline, reducing the resistance to changing that, because obviously the system's going to really want to protect. It's actually, people think it's malevolent, but it's actually extremely benevolent, the system. And one thing I have learned in all this time of work is people think, oh, I'm doing this thing, and or you've probably, like me, heard it all. People have done, said, experienced horrible things. And I just sit back and go, wow, it's all just the system trying to protect itself.
Yeah, that's
all
right. The subconscious is always, or the black box, as you're putting it today, the subconscious is always trying to do the best it can for you.
Yeah.
And even though on the surface and in day-to-day life, we experience that and as limitation, that limitation is there because it's like, no, like if for me to step into whatever it is, X, Y, Z, that's unsafe. So your subconscious then based on it creates it's just trying to do the best it can for you and keep you safe.
I just had a really cool picture in my mind, right?
Yeah.
I never had it before. So people tend to, not all, but some come because they're wanting to create bigger and better for themselves, which is totally fine. But a lot of people come because their life has crashed.
Yeah.
Right. So I want you to imagine, this is the plane analogy.
Yeah.
This is about to go viral. Right. This is the plane analogy. So imagine like a person comes to see us and they come in, they're like, my life's crashed and burned, and we're standing there in the rubble. And a lot of times people are like going through the rubble, looking at the pieces of the plane or thinking about, but they don't, it's like, why? So what's the first thing do the emergency services do after a plane crash?
Look at the black box.
So they look at the black box to find out what happened.
What happened?
What happened? What was said? Who did what? And then they can go, well, from what the black box recorder recorded, and I'm making a big assumption here that it'd be interesting to actually know this fact for later reference. Does it record, electrical changes in the plane? Does it record something went down? Does it record all the radio communications? What does it record? Does it record everything is my question.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to jump in here before I forget this. All right.
Yes.
So basically, what the investigators are trying to do is make sense. They're trying to make sense of what happened, right? Because if they can't make sense of what happened and why it happened, if they can't reconcile all the information and put all the jigsaw pieces together, then that particular crash remains unresolved. So it's unresolved. So in order to resolve it, in order to know how to do life or not life, or how to I was going to say the plane, I keep going back down the life path, right? But in order then to make things safer, to know how to do it differently in the future,
so that
it doesn't happen again, they need to be able to make sense of what happened in the past. And that's exactly what we do with clients, right? Exactly what we do with clients.
I love this. I love it. I know,
right? I know. Yeah.
So, and I seriously have never thought about it in that way before, but I had this image in my head of, a crash site. And I'm not here to say all my poor clients are going, well, life's not like a crash waste.
Like a plane crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are a few where it's like you come and go, wow, we really are kicking over and looking at what crashed, what crashed and burned and why.
And it's like even though life might not be a complete and utter plane crash now, there have been experiences in your life that may have been like a mini plane crash, or just a plane crash in general, that you've been able to sort of for want of a better word, recover from, or at least have strategies in place so you can still carve out some kind of life for yourself. But there has been events in your life that you haven't been able to make sense of, and if you can't make sense of it, then it remains unresolved. It's just like, it's like an unsolved case, unsolved mystery, right? Or a cold case in your brain. So that's what it's like.
Oh no, I love that.
So then it's like, well, if I can't make sense of it, then how do I know how to respond to it? How do I know what to do here? And a lot of the time, the answer is, I've got no idea. I have no idea how to respond. So then I'm going to go into my black box and see how I may have responded to something, way back, when I was 6 years old. And that's how I'm going to respond to life now, like I was that 6-year-old, because that's the reference that I have. Does that make? I'm not going down too much. I hope I'm not going too much down a different rabbit hole here.
No, that's good.
But that's exactly what we do. Yeah.
oh my goodness, I absolutely love that. And I hope that helps people to understand what it is that we're doing in session, and different than, I guess, and not taking away any power from other types of therapies or counseling. Like they all have their
absolutely
own,
not.
they all have their own place and their own time. But for us, I guess, the mechanism of how we can then get access to the black box, because, you know, there could be a black box recorder, but if I picked it up and said, right, I want to access that information, if I don't have probably clearance, if I don't have the correct digital other mechanisms, then it's just a box and we can't access it. And it's like some people, you know, you could have what are these things called? It's like that. If we think about our brainstem, or the unconscious, subconscious, the nervous system, all that kind of. If we think about it like a hard drive, well, if I lose that, really, how many times do you lose the cord for a really specific thing?
Yeah.
And you can't, right? Even to the, like my MacBook from the last MacBook has a different plug. And so if I don't have that plug, I don't have access to the system. So same thing with the black box recorder. What makes the work that we do unique is that, than say just counselling on its own, for example, is that we have the technology through muscle testing to access the black box recorder. So to get responses from the system to give us an idea of to read the black box, or to read that part of the nervous system of what happened. And I guess if we think about, you know, the crash, what do you call that when you analogy? You know, a crash is never generally, unless you're doing it on purpose, which there are, you know, a small amount of people who might on purpose crash their car or something, but it's never expected.
Exactly.
And it's the unexpected nature of it. Then you could be pilots and they're just going along, and then something unexpected happens. And depending on the pilot and their experience, if we think about the person, I know this is getting really, I hope everyone's following along here. So depending on the pilot, which is you in your life, you're the pilot in the plane being your life. So depending on, so something happens, like a bird goes in your propeller or in your engine, which happens, and then it affects the thing. You didn't expect that to happen, although it's, you know, there are things that in life we know can happen, but obviously we don't think it will happen to us necessarily. So the bird happens, and next thing we've lost an engine, or we've lost power in an area of life. Now, depending on that pilot could be in their 60s and super experienced in old school flying, and takes control of the plane themselves and lands the plane safely. And it's not to say that someone's much younger, I'm not saying that, but just an example. Or you could have another pilot who is it's their maiden flight and it's never happened to them before. And even though they know there's protocols around what you should do, they might go into a bit of freeze and maybe not take the actions that they could have taken. So there's so many analogies here that we could see inside the possibility of something crashing as to the resources that the person has within themselves, the experiences that they've had within themselves, as to whether it ends up as a crash or possibly averted. So a few people might come in and they're like, oh, you know, I've had a few near misses, or my life almost went into all that kind of thing. And again, it's and that's, I guess, what makes the sessions so different, is that every pilot, you know, has got different experiences or different flown different planes or had different co-pilots, or
yeah, that's right.
and the co-pilot can change the way that we respond to things in life as well. So I think that's a great analogy, and I hope that actually helps people to understand a little bit more about when they come in. The muscle testing, which is obviously placing pressure on a muscle. We can muscle test any muscle in the body to get a response and to see, how the body responds to something in particular.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that to sort of talk about the unexpected nature, to sort of put it in a even though I'm loving the analogy, by the way, and I think it works perfectly.
I think we need to flesh that out somehow.
I think we do too. It makes perfect sense. Like you're saying, you're the pilot and the plane's your life.
Yeah.
So in regards to life, I mean, just to talk more about us as a human, we basically come into this life with expectations on how life is going to be for us. So it's like I'm born and I expect that this is going to happen, and there's some what we call innate expectations we have, and as in expectations from birth. And anyway, we could get into the technicalities of that maybe another day, but it's called innate expectations, and one of those innate expectations, for example, is to be accepted, nurtured, and validated. And I've come into this life with the expectation that I'll be accepted for who I am, and I'll be validated for who I am, and I'll be accepted, and nurtured. And when that doesn't happen, like let's just say we're not accepted or we're not validated for the expression of who we are, then it's the unexpected nature of that makes that like it's a shock for us or a trauma for us. And that's the big thing, like just trying to reiterate that, to like when I back at the start we're talking about what's coming up in sessions for people lately. It's having that understanding and awareness around that this isn't how you thought things were going to go, right? No. And it's like, even back to the plane analogy, it's like I'm just flying along assuming, well, I'm going to take off here and my expectation is that this is how the flight's going to go, and then we're going to do this, and that there's the forecast of a bit of turbulence halfway, so I expect that. So when that happens, that's not a shock. But then when the bird hits the propeller, like that's a shock to me, or that goes into the engine and the engine falters, like that's a shock. Yeah. And then then the thing is, it's like there's many things we can connect it to through our chat today, but it's like, and I know we spoke about being able to make sense of something, and it's like we literally, like, I think that, like, I might be wrong with my figures here, but I think it's like 3/100ths of a second or something. Yeah. We have 3/100ths of a second to be able to make sense of and reconcile what this unexpected experience is to me. And then, given this unexpected experience, now how do I go about living life? And if we can't reconcile that, we can't make sense of it, then, like you say, we go into survival and we go into that back black box of ours and then, into fight, flight. Because what happens then is, if we can't make sense of it, then our subconscious can't be sure the threat's over. So then it constantly perceives a threat. Yeah. And so therefore I'm just in the back blocks and in that, like in that brainstem behavior all the time. So I hope that kind of gives it a bit more, does. Like a bit of an example of just around how what we expect, and then how unexpected things can impact us, and it's our ability to make sense of it. And back to what we do in session, it's helping our clients to be able to make sense of what happened to me. Yep. And therefore now I know how I can move forward from there. Yeah. Yeah. Just like, getting access to that black box, and the black box might reveal, the pilot might be living in, it's something I did. So for a person, it could be, I did something wrong. I have all this guilt. I'm living with guilt. I can't go back to being a pilot. I can't go back to doing the things that I would normally do in life because
I'm afraid it'll happen again. It'll be my fault. You know, all these people might have, you know, like if we talk just like an imaginative situation, but, you know, we crash a plane, all these people have died. That's on me. And, and whatever the fallout was of, you know, if we think actually it's such a great analogy, because you've got the pilots in the plane and then you've got all these passengers that are, so you might not be the pilot in the situation. You could be a passenger, and you could notice something's going wrong in the back of the plane and run up and tell someone, and they might not listen, and it goes down, and therefore it's like, well, I had no control over what was happening around me. And what people can be then left with is, whenever they feel like they're in a situation where people are not listening, then it triggers their black box recorder. They go into fight flight, they go into upset, they go into whatever it is, you know, and it just unconsciously they're in an emergency situation when someone's not listening. Or when, you know, I'm in the car and the person who was driving crashed, I had no control. So the way that the issue ends up presenting for people, depending on where they are in the actual analogy, is quite interesting. And so again, it's for our job just to help them to, you know, well, what happened? It makes sense of it. That's the most, because some people know what happened. That, I think that's really key to note about the work we do with Resolve, is that a lot of people know what happened, and they come into session having talked about relaying and going over that trauma 1,000 times. They know what happened, but often they didn't go to the next step, which is to make sense of what happened. And it's going, and that's, I guess, takes it to another level when we work, taking the tools of kinesiology into Resolve, which is more looking at, well, how do we make sense of this? And now that we make sense of it, like a person on a crash site looking at the black box, they go, we know what happened. We know why. We can make sense of the entire situation, and we confidently know that we've changed this wiring, or we've changed this thing in the plane which failed, and we feel confident that that won't happen again. And so, you know, people can go back to using, you know, come out of their black box recorder, back into whole brain, start to think normally, calm down, make decisions and choices in life, decide to fly somewhere different. Flying could be off, you know, no, never flying again because that went down, you know. So, but once we make sense of it, and we go, oh, wow, it actually wasn't my fault. Or, oh, wow, like, actually what I can see now is that my mother was doing the very best that she could inside of her own trauma, or whatever.
I think too, like, that's a really good example, like you're saying, how the pilot could blame themselves, or if you're a passenger and you notice, you know, something, you know, maybe a crack in the window and you didn't say anything. It's like there could be, like, there can be a million reasons why the plane's crashed, a million reasons why something's happened.
That's right. Right back to the guy that last did the mechanic work on it. He noticed a bolt.
That's exactly.
You know, it keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah, and what our subconscious is very, very good at doing, and it's like you said, it's part of that benevolent protection, is to make it about us.
That's right.
Yeah, you know, it makes it, it's like, oh, it's my fault. And if it's my fault, then therefore I won't, like, you know, therefore then I have limitations around whatever that is, right? It's my fault the plane. Yeah.
And therefore I'll put lock and key on certain aspects of my choices. Which comes back to even what you were talking about at the very, very beginning, where people are feeling out of control, you know, no possibility in their life, feeling lack of motivation. And lack of motivation, if we come round to it, could be that, well, the last time I got inspired and geared my plane up and tried to fly somewhere new, it ended up it ended up crashed. And so I'm going to take all my choice off the table because it's safer to do so.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I'm going to, I think we could talk on and on and on, and I feel like we need to do a part B of crash
plane crash
plane
investigation.
Exactly. I feel like that's coming. And
Yes.
so I really love some feedback from people if they enjoyed that, and I loved that. And I really invite you to dive in, and anything you keep getting from that, Aaron, please share.
Okay, sure.
And let's do a part 2 on plane crash investigations and dive into that a little bit more, because I think it just starts to bubble out and be pretty cool. I love it.
Thank you so much. I would be happy to do that with you, part 2 or
That'd
part
be
B.
amazing. Part B,
Yeah.
let's do that. Okay, so I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on today and diving into more of what it is that we do, understanding it better. I think having these conversations really helps people to start to, I mean, I think people had a session right now. Personally, I feel like I did. So, you know, the plug is, if your life's a plane crash,
yeah.
come see us. We've got access to the black box recorder. We can find out what
Yes,
happened and why, and get you flying again.
That's great. Love it. I love it.
That's so cheesy. And I'm not here to make fun of people's lives that are legitimate.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Not at all. But, you know, we're just poking a little bit of fun at ourselves, really. But thank you so much for coming on today. I look forward to part B around this. Let's dive in a bit more. And thank you again so much. Look forward to catching up with you again soon, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me always. And looking forward to catching up again soon too.
Cannot wait. You take it easy, and talk to you all very soon.
Okay, bye.